Hi, everybody. My name is Daniel West. I'm one of the founders of AuctionMethod, and I'm currently the Vice President of Sales and Marketing here at AuctionMethod. So today we've got the subject matter for today's monthly webinar is terms and conditions of auction. What I'm hoping to go over today is just some English language, some plain practical English language, terms and conditions language that hopefully you can implement right away and hopefully use it to sort of level the playing field between the bidders and to make enforcement of the rules more equal between everyone, and ultimately to resolve disputes and conflict between yourself and the bidders primarily. One of the things that I wanted to start with before we even get into the presentation itself is that there's a difference from my point of view between the terms and conditions of an auction and what we call the user agreement for a website. This is a common source of confusion, and I just wanted to be clear that what we're talking about today is terms and conditions for individual auction events, and not the entire legal agreement that governs the use of your particular bidding platform. Some of you are using AuctionMethod, in which case you have your own user agreement. It's a large, long, complex legal document that no one ever reads. And if you're using another bidding platform, they will have their own user agreement that governs the behavior of users on that platform. Now, the user agreements will reference the terms and conditions of auction and state that those terms and conditions of auction will be applicable to any sale that happen on the platform. But typically the language is quite different. It's a lot of legalese in the user agreement, and that's the opposite for terms and conditions. You want this to be plain language, easy to read, easy to understand, and not be overly complex with a bunch of legal language. So I just wanted to set the scope for the discussion today because we're not going to be talking about user agreements. We're just talking about terms and conditions. Before we get started, I just wanted to suggest that as we go along, if you have questions that you'd like to have me to answer at the end of the show, at the end of the webinar, just put them into the Q&A section there in Zoom, and I'll do my best to get to them. So without further ado, we'll just jump in here. We'll cover the agenda for today. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be covering the 4 critical sections of terms and conditions. These are typically referred to, at least by us, as the preview and inspection information, the payment terms, the pickup, removal, or shipping language, and the disclaimers and dispute resolution language. It kind of follows the order of a normal auction, right? So bidders, the first engagement with the auction is to see what you are selling, the preview period. Then once they participate in the auction, they win some items, they're going to pay you, and then they're going to come pick it up. And what they need to know too is if there's a problem, what do they need to know about where you stand on issues? That's the dispute resolution and disclaimers language. Throughout the presentation, when we cover these 4 sections, we will have some sample language in there. And I'm happy to share this sample language with you after the webinar. Just shoot me an email at daniel@auctionmethod.com, and I'll share that sample language with you. You can copy and paste it from the screen if you'd like, take some screenshots. Keep in mind that I'm not a lawyer. I'm just somebody who was an auctioneer for many years. I'm a 2nd-generation auctioneer, and I've been working in the auction business now for 20, 30 years. I can't remember. It's a long time. And nowadays, I talk to a lot of auctioneers who work across multiple industries, asset classes. Everybody does things their own way. So I'm not suggesting that you copy the language that I suggest here as verbatim. Ultimately, you have to craft your own terms and conditions. I'm hoping to just provide you with some food for thought. See if maybe some of the things that I'm suggesting are helpful to you. Ultimately, you have to fine-tune them yourself. We will be covering towards the end, right before the Q&A session, some of the common pitfalls that I've seen within the terms and conditions language. I'm interested too, beyond just questions and answers, if you have comments or feedback or other insight. I know that we have a combination of people in the audience today. Some of you are just starting out, brand new auctioneers, maybe haven't even had your first auction, and some of you have been in the auction business longer than I have. So I'd love to get some feedback from you all. All right, so let's go on. Let's jump in right into the very first section, critical section of preview and inspection. So the general idea here is you need to tell people exactly how they're going to see the stuff they're buying. And this can take a variety of forms. So in many cases, mostly with online auctions, you're going to have a preview period where people can come and inspect the assets that are being sold. If it's a live auction, of course, usually they're inspecting the day of the sale, maybe even the day before. Either way, you have to let them know, how they can perform their due diligence. And so in some cases, you might not actually want them coming on site before the auction starts. In those cases, you might be asking them to conduct their preview entirely online based upon your descriptions, your pictures, your videos, and so on. Whatever it is, however you're going to structure your preview period for an auction, you have to spell it out exactly when and how the bidders are going to come and look at the assets being sold, right? This is really, really important for people to know. How do I inspect? So you're going to give them, of course, the dates and the times, the address, right? Sometimes auctioneers don't want to publish the address in advance. That's okay. That's fine. If you're going to publish the address on the day of sale, or you're going to email the address to people who say that they want to come to the preview, however you're going to do it, just spell it out. That's the important part. The other thing is, if there isn't going to be a public preview, if people cannot come and physically touch and look at the assets being sold, be very clear about that. And importantly, consider the idea, it's a pretty novel idea for most auctioneers out there, that you're going to provide a virtual inspection. Now, I'm not just talking about the pictures, the description, and the videos. Nowadays, just like this webinar right now is being live streamed onto YouTube, you yourself can very easily, from your phone, live stream an auction inspection, a virtual inspection period. And you can turn on the chat mode and allow people to give you some direction. So you can do a walkthrough of an auction, give a general overview of what's going on, talk about the location, talk about the sale in general, and then invite people to direct you to specific assets so that you can walk up and video it and discuss anything that you see about it. There's a couple of reasons for doing this. One of the reasons, of course, is to satisfy the inspection period process, right? Like you want to give people an opportunity to see what they need to see, to do their due diligence. If you're not going to let them on site, that's fine. Giving them this opportunity to do a virtual inspection via streaming video is going to help a lot. It's going to make them feel more confident, more secure. The other reason is for search engine optimization. That's not really the point of today's discussion, but if you have videos on YouTube, then those are going to be search engine optimized. They're going to be content that gives you some Google juice, right? And the other thing is that, so Google owns YouTube, right? And they love when people stream live. It's engaging content. And you'll be surprised if you haven't done any live streaming on YouTube, you'll be surprised when you first go live. If you have even a small audience, they will very likely jump on and start watching your inspection. So try it out. It's not scary. It's not hard. Just be yourself. You don't have to have a fancy production or anything like that. Do turn on the chat though. That way people, the bidders can ask specific questions of you, and you can they can guide you as you do the virtual preview. I think that part is, if there's one takeaway from this, besides being very clear about, how and when you're conducting the preview, please try to make use of these streaming videos. They're not just for simulcast auctions anymore. Even if you have an on-site inspection period, still consider streamlining. Try it out. Give me some feedback. Let me know how it goes for you. The other thing that I don't see a lot of auctioneers doing, I'd say maybe only about 10, maybe 10% of the auctioneers that I see include any kind of language about late announcements. So as an auction progresses, as you move forward, there's a good chance that something changes. Who knows? Maybe it's a change in the description of an asset. Maybe you discover that the odometer reading is different than you imagined on a car, or different than you had written down. Maybe something has changed with the terms and conditions of the sale itself. Either way, putting into the preview and inspection period a little bit of language that that any announcements that you make later on will take precedence over anything that was said or seen during the inspection period. So you can see over here on the right-hand side, we have a little bit of sample language. This is a very clean, clear presentation of the preview and inspection period. I think the only thing that I would suggest is missing from this is the location. So it says here at our facility. Maybe that's self-explanatory. Maybe it's not. Normally, I would suggest putting the actual address in there and maybe linking it to Google Maps. If you're using the AuctionMethod software system, of course, that's done automatically. The other thing here is this text down here below, right? About any announcements that are posted online or updated lot information will take precedence. It's not absolutely necessary. Like I said, most auctioneers go without it, but it can be kind of helpful. Again, you're just managing expectations and setting the ground rules for the sale. All right, now we get to the money section, the payment terms. This one is absolutely critical. This is why you're in the business anyway, right? Is to collect the money from the bidders. So again, plain language, be very clear, who, what, when, where, why, how, right? All that stuff. Mostly, when do they have to pay? I see this again and again and again, where auctioneers do not give a deadline for payment. You don't want to be unclear about payment terms. If there's any section of the terms that you should not be unclear about, it's the payment terms. It's the most important. So you want to set a deadline. You want to have a period of, say, 24 hours after the auction ends if it's an online auction. By default, I'm talking about online auctions. Much of what I'm saying applies to live on-site auctions as well. But when I sort of am defaulting, I'm usually just talking about timed online auctions. Anyway, the point is that you want to have this payment window. Now, one little tip here is it's oftentimes good to sort of to have the bidding period end, the payment period begin as soon as the last item closes, and to schedule it so that the removal period doesn't happen until the payment period has ended. This isn't possible for everybody, but if you can do this, if you can sort of set it up so that before the removal period begins, all of the payments are in, that'll give you an opportunity to deal with bidders who are in default, stragglers, people who haven't paid on time. If you're going to relist their items or whatever you're going to do, you can do that before the removal period begins. Once the removal period is over, any attempt to resell an item will suffer a loss, likely as not. But if you can resell an item before the removal period begins, there's a good chance that you might actually realize higher bid amounts, final bid amounts, than you did in the original auction. All right, I don't want to diverge too far from the outline here, but we get to the methods and the limits. Not everyone has limits, and it's fine if you don't. What we mean by limits is if you're going to accept credit cards, you might want to try to mitigate the risk of loss due to chargebacks and fraud by setting a cap. For example, if you're a smaller auction company, you might say, any invoice below $2,000 you can pay with a credit card online. But anything above that, you're gonna have to come into the office. If you're a larger one, you might set the limits at $20,000, $30,000. Of course, this is discretionary, and it's something that will be based upon your own experiences, your own risk tolerance, and all of that. But you do want to specify regardless which forms of payment are acceptable. Most auctioneers are accepting credit cards. Most are still happy to take cash. Some will still take cashier's checks. That's fine. Wire, bank transfers, all that. If you're taking personal or business checks still in this day and age, you probably live in a small town or you're working in a closed market, or you have really friendly bidders. I would suggest that generally speaking, auctioneers should not be taking personal checks. All right, if you have fees, now this is a huge one. If you have fees, you have any fees, any potential fees that might be charged, you have to list them. This seems sort of like a no-brainer. Some of you might wonder why I'm stressing it. It's because you'd be surprised by how many auctioneers don't disclose the fees that they plan to charge. So what do I mean? Well, default is buyer's premium. Most auctioneers charge a buyer's premium. So if you're going to charge a buyer's premium, say so specifically, exactly. How much is the buyer's premium? Are you offering any discounts? And are there any modifications to the buyer's premium? Sales tax, of course, hopefully you're collecting sales tax unless you're selling assets that don't get taxed. But most generally, people are collecting sales tax. Say so. You don't want people being surprised by their invoice, right? There are other fees, potential fees that might be coming up. You might have potential storage fees. You might have DMV handling fees. You might have gun cleaning fees or whatever. There's all kinds of different fees that you might want to be charging the buyers. So you want to list them all. They all need to be in your terms and conditions, whatever it is that you're charging. Do disclose every single one of them. By the way, if you're using AuctionMethod software system, there's an entire fee system where you can keep track of fees that you're charging to buyers or fees that you're charging to sellers, and you can have a long list of them. They can be flat fees, percentage-based, they can be taxable, and they can be not taxable. It's a pretty nice system, so if you're using AuctionMethod software, use the fee system to charge fees other than buyer's premium and sales tax. If you are auto charging cards, if for example, within our software system, there's an auto pay option where people who are enrolled in the auto pay program, their cards will be charged automatically as soon as the sale is over. If you have that enabled, be clear about what happens when it happens, if you have limits, what they can expect there. Generally speaking, you want auto charges to be an opt-in program. Some auctioneers make it an opt-out program. Either way, whatever you do, be very clear about the way that auto charges work. That's not one that you want to hide. Last but not least, non-payment remedies. What are you going to do if they don't pay on time? This is of critical importance. So you're going to have right up front, you have your deadline, the payment period. When that payment period ends, what's going to happen? A lot of auctioneers are still, A, not disclosing what happens, and B, they're making the terrible mistake of contacting the second highest bidder and offering it to them for a discounted amount. If you're doing that, I encourage you to reflect on what you're doing and how you are teaching your bidders to use and abuse your system. A better option is to charge a relisting fee, a much better option. So in those cases, as soon as the payment period is over, then all you do is you go and you charge everybody who has a credit card on file, you charge them 15, let's say a 10, 15% relisting fee, and you run a follow-up auction right away before the removal period, as I was saying. And you let everybody know, come back, bid again. These, some people didn't pay on time. That does several things. It gives the existing buyers and bidders an opportunity to again use the auction method to express their values and their wishes. It also makes it very clear that your terms and conditions mean something. If you don't enforce these rules, then they're not very good, right? It's like a parent who tells their kid they're going to take their cell phone away for a week or something like that, and then the night's over and they hand the phone back to the kid. It's that kind of thing. What's the kid learning, right? What are the bidders learning if you don't enforce your terms? You're teaching them, and they are learning. I promise you. So if you do a relisting fee, do a follow-up auction, you'll be surprised that you won't suffer a large loss, and you'll be getting rid of bad bidders. You will surprisingly also be rewarding some of your good bidders who simply don't want to pick up. There are good reasons why somebody might bid at an auction and not pay. For example, let's say someone is located 200 miles away from you. They're bidding on a big piece of industrial equipment. It's important to them, and they think, well, it looks like I'm winning that piece. I'm going to also bid on a hammer and a water bottle, right? $5 each. They end up losing the industrial equipment. Now they have an invoice for a hammer and a water bottle for 10 bucks. They're not going to drive 200 miles to come pick it up. And what are you going to do? Are you going to penalize them? You're going to punish them? You're going to blacklist them? It doesn't make any sense, right? Just offer them this option to relist. They'll pay the relisting fee. They'll be happy to do it. Put the items in a follow-up auction. No big deal. Do it before the removal period so that people who are going to come pick up know, right? They have an opportunity to come in and they think, well, you know what? I wasn't going to bid on that water bottle, but now that I'm going to go pick up, I'm going to go ahead and bid on it. Maybe you'll get 10 bucks out of it. That's how it works. All right. You see the sample language on the right-hand side. Again, please make up your own, right? These are just sort of guidelines, but they do contain all of the basics for the payment section. So again, let's just cover it real quick. I won't beat a dead horse here, but you do want to say when the payment is due. And just like on the previous previous sample language, I think actually that there could be a little bit more disclosure here. So saying full payment is required within 48 hours of auction close is good, but saying that it's due by Friday the 26th by 5 p.m. Eastern time is much better. The more specific you are with your language, the happier everybody will be. Again, we cover the methods of payment. This is good. Any fees that are going to be in here, and you see the default language here, right? A 15% penalty fee. I like to call it a relisting fee. There's a reason for that. So a penalty fee, I don't know, it has sort of a negative connotation to it. I think a relisting fee also is probably a little bit more defensible in case of a chargeback, because you are in fact charging to relist the item, which is a service that you regularly provide, so it's defensible. Penalty fees might not be as easily defensible. Moving right along to removal and shipping. So hopefully everything else has worked out. People came and inspected, they participated, they won, and they paid. So now what? We got to get their stuff. So we don't want to forget about this aspect of the sale. And you'll see it's actually, I have more notes here than I do on any of the other sections. So that's because there's sometimes some complexity involved in the removal process. Again, you want to be very specific with your language about when and where people are supposed to pick up. So you want to set a deadline, same as you did before. There's a period of time, a window where removal and shipping happens. Yeah, where, when, deadline, and then whatever the buyer's responsibilities are. So depending on what type of sale you're doing, these responsibilities might vary quite a lot. If you're selling store returns, retail goods, that kind of thing, there really aren't any responsibilities. Show up, show your invoice, show your debit card, or show your driver's license or your credit card, and you're good to go. If, however, let's say you're liquidating a grocery store and somebody's buying refrigeration equipment, then they might be responsible for safely disconnecting the freon lines. That type of thing, right? If you're dealing with electricity or plumbing, if you're dealing with hoods, the kitchen hoods, disconnecting those, If they trigger the Ansel system with the fire extinguisher, it's going to be problematic. I've been there. So anything like that, whatever their responsibilities are, you got to tell them. You got to be prepared for them to come and do what they need to do, which is to get their stuff. So the buyer responsibilities could be kind of a long and extensive section of the terms and conditions. One of the biggest issues that I see with auctioneers nowadays is that they are loosey-goosey when it comes to checking for identification and authorization during the removal process. You want to trust everybody. You got your money. It feels like it's easy going. It's all over now. You just got to hand the stuff over to the buyers, and that's that. It's going to be a problem, though, because if you hand the stuff over to the wrong person, especially if you're dealing with credit cards, there's a good chance that you're going to get stuck with a fraudulent charge. It's typically known as friendly fraud within the industry, but basically people know that you're not following the protocol properly. They know that you're not actually checking IDs and stuff. And they will take advantage of this by purchasing items at auction, putting it on a credit card. It might even be their own credit card. It's not necessarily a stolen credit card. And then send a friend over to pick it up. You release the goods to the friend, and the winning bidder says, I paid for it, but I didn't get it. I never received it. They issue a chargeback. The credit card company gets a hold of you and they say, can you prove that you delivered these goods to the buyer, that you handed it over? And you have no proof because you didn't check. It doesn't take that much time to check someone's ID. And if they're going to authorize someone else besides themselves to pick up their goods, they need to let you know in advance. Within the AuctionMethod software system, there's a little form that the buyers can fill out if they're going to authorize someone else besides themselves to pick up. Don't release goods unless you have received authorization for releasing those goods by the buyer, by the winning bidder, actually the card holder if you're dealing with credit card transactions. If you haven't received that authorization, you're not going to release it. I don't care if they have a copy of their paid invoice. That's not sufficient. Always check their ID. The more that you can do to verify that you're dealing with the right person, the fewer problems you're going to have. I promise you, if you're just getting started, it feels very easy to trust people. And you can, for the most part, right? 99% of the people that are coming to pick up, they're not bad people, and they're not trying to screw you out of money. But that 1% is going to hurt real bad, right? Don't do it. Check their IDs religiously. All of these terms and conditions, not only do you have to be very clear about writing them, you have to be determined to enforce them. Don't make exceptions. If you make exceptions, it'll come back to bite you. I promise you. So again, what happens if somebody doesn't meet the deadline for removal? You have to tell them what's going to happen. So it's a sort of an if-then statement. If you don't remove your items by the deadline of whatever, 4 p.m. on March 3rd, then fill in the blank. What are you going to do? Don't just sort of like leave that open-ended because that's not gonna serve you. Maybe you can say it will be considered abandoned and forfeited. That's common language, especially when it comes to business liquidations and such. Maybe it'll be resold, right? Maybe the buyer loses it and the item will be resold. Maybe there will be a lien sale if you're dealing with titled vehicles. I don't know what you're going to do. But whatever it is that you plan to do with items that have been purchased, they've been paid for, but they haven't been removed on time, you have to be very clear about that. A lot of auctioneers who run their own auction houses and have the property on site, they simply charge a storage fee. That's fine. Whatever it is, say $20 per lot, that's okay, right? And after a certain period of time, that's over as well. You're not just going to keep accruing expenses for the rest of the life of the item. At some point, you're going to have to get rid of it. So again, whatever your game plan is for dealing, first you have to think about your game plan and what it then come up with it. And whatever it is that you determine, put it in the terms and conditions for that sale. Very important. Again, you could relist items in a follow-up auction, but and maybe that's a fine thing to do. But I think that it's easier if somebody has paid and they haven't picked up, and they aren't paying for storage or anything like that. In almost all cases, that should just be considered abandoned, and you can get rid of it. Give it to one of the many scrap dealers who shows up at your auctions. If you're shipping is a completely different beast. There probably ought to be an entire webinar just on shipping and nothing else. If you do shipping, you have to be very clear about who is doing the shipping. So are you doing the shipping? Is the buyer doing the shipping through a third party? How does that exactly work? Because there are implications, there are sales tax implications, there are liability implications, potential chargeback implications in terms of who is doing the shipping, who's taking responsibility for that particular act. Regardless, if you're doing shipping, it's the same as the rest of this. You have to be very, very clear. Who is it that's doing it? Are you going to do it? Is the auctioneer performing the packaging and shipping of an item? Just understand you're taking on a huge liability if you do. It's okay. It'll increase prices, and maybe you'll benefit by operating essentially a packing and shipping company that is part of your auction services. I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do, but it's just a lot to bite off. If it's more than you can handle right now, you should probably use a third party. And you can contract with a third party. You can just make recommendations. Back in the day, companies like Craters and Freighters would be more than happy to be named as the preferred shipping carrier for a particular auction. Either way, you'd find a local person who's willing to do packing and shipping, or a local company, and you can still recommend them. But again, the buyer still is releasing the goods. They're providing authorization for you to release it to their agent with whom they are contracting, right? Where the relationship is between the shipper and the buyer, not so much the shipper and the auctioneer. I hope that was clear. Anyway, if there are questions about this, you will ask, I hope. All right. So disclaimers and dispute resolution. This is probably the most popular part of the terms and conditions because the language is almost always the same. What you will see traditionally is this very first line over here that you see in the sample language. Pretty much every auctioneer has this. All items are sold as is, where is, with no warranties expressed or implied. And they usually stop there. And that's okay. It's fine. But you might want to think about additional disclaimers and dispute resolution. I see disclaimers in every single terms and conditions out there. Everybody, like I said, has this all items sold as is, where is. Few people put dispute resolution language into their terms and conditions. So dispute resolution is really just about, if the buyer's got a problem with the sale, with the transaction somehow, maybe they get on site and they believe that the item that they purchased, the item that is being handed over to them, was misrepresented, or it's the wrong one, or whatever. They have some kind of a problem. It's broken when you said it was working. I don't know. There's a million different reasons why a buyer might complain. The point is that if they have a complaint, you want to tell them ahead of time how you're going to resolve that dispute, what they need to do to have their dispute heard by you, and what you're going to do as a result of the dispute. You should always make sure that the dispute resolution process happens before the removal process. Basically, once the buyer takes possession, it's over. They don't have a claim, right? That's why the shipping thing is a little bit tricky, because if you're the shipper, it's not really over until it gets into their possession, is it? So the point, though, is that you normally want to give yourself maximum control. So within the user agreement of any platform, certainly any owner-operator platform, the language should be very clear that the auctioneer has almost godlike control over everything and their word is final. You don't need to go so wild and crazy with the disclaimers, but saying that the auctioneer handles the disputes and that the auctioneer's sale record is conclusive is helpful. Giving yourself a little wiggle room to reopen bidding if you need to. That's oftentimes language that's necessary at a live auction. It's not so necessary at a timed online auction. Typically, what you suggest at a timed auction is just that the sale record is conclusive, and that's that. You're actually not going to reopen bidding. But you could, you could say that that as a result of a dispute, let's say an item is misrepresented, that you'll offer to cancel the sale and to relist the item in a follow-up auction or something like that. A piece of language that's growing within the disclaimer section is this one right here, where it says all sales are final. That's sort of customary. No returns, and you'll see, or chargebacks. I personally think it's kind of hopeful thinking to say in your terms and conditions that chargebacks are not allowed. Credit card companies ultimately, if you're a merchant services, if you're a merchant rather, and you have services, then you are subject to chargebacks. But what you're basically saying here is that the dispute resolution process is up to you. If absent any kind of fraud on the buyer's part or your part, what you're saying is that a valid buyer who legitimately placed a bid, made their payment, and either did or did not pick up is not entitled to a chargeback. It does give you a little bit of room to stand on, leg to stand on. Gives you something to stand on. It's not just saying that you don't allow chargebacks won't prevent chargebacks, but having this language in there will help you a little bit when chargebacks inevitably happen. So I do suggest putting it in there. Again, it's a little bit of hopeful thinking, but if it can prevent or resolve, 10 to 20% of the potential chargebacks, that's a massive benefit for 2 words. So put those 2 words into your disclaimer section for sure. The other one is about guarantees. So traditionally, auctioneers don't offer guarantees. That's excuse me. That's what the all items sold as is, where is, with no warranties expressed or implied means. But I do want to say, I want to suggest anyway, that you think about what a potential guarantee might yield you. So this is just a thought experiment. I'm not telling you that every auctioneer should have some kind of a guarantee, but especially if you're not allowing on-site sales or on-site previews. If all previews inspections are done virtually or just online, having a guarantee of some sort, for example, if you show up, you've paid, you won, you paid, and you show up to remove and you're not happy, I will give you your money back. No questions asked. It's not necessarily a bad policy. I can just feel some of you auctioneers, your old timers, cringing at that and thinking it's a bad idea. And maybe it is for many auctions. But think about it. Again, if you're going to have an issue that needs to be resolved, a dispute, give it a window, a period of time. Again, before the removal period is over, that's when, that's the window. Just define it, give it a little bit of some time, date and time language. So you can see at the bottom, there are these optional ads. I think that the majority of these belong on the user agreement for the site, but depending on your own situation, you might want to think about them. So a non-delivery remedy means what happens if something's stolen before the buyer gets there? They paid, they show up, and an item is stolen, it's gone. One of the other buyers took it, a thief broke in overnight, or as you all know, a seller might have, they didn't like the price, so they come and take it back. There's all kinds of reasons why you might not be able to deliver an item. So in those cases, consider putting non-delivery language into the terms and conditions. Most people put it into the user agreement and ignore it in the terms and conditions. But if it's a potential problem, again, just a potential problem, pop it in. The rest of them, like personal injury on site, liability for tech glitches, shipping damages, indemnification, all of that stuff, you could think about putting it in your terms and conditions, but don't. Just put it in your user agreement. So we're coming up on 40 minutes. I want to leave a little bit of time for questions and answers. We've already talked about all of these key terms extensively, so I'm not going to go through and painfully take them apart again. That would be unnecessary. But the big white thing over here in the top right-hand corner, that's the takeaway from this slide. You want to surface the rules that cost money or end rights up front where bidders cannot miss. If there's only one takeaway from this entire webinar, it's that you need to be clear. You need to be upfront with the bidders. Terms and conditions is where you're going to do that. No one is going to fight you over your user agreement. But if your terms and conditions are either unclear or not uniformly enforced, you're going to have problems. So if there's something that's going to potentially affect a buyer, either their pocketbook, their time, or their rights, think about it from their standpoint, think about it from yours, and address it in the terms and conditions. Hopefully what we've talked about so far covers all of it, but there might be some nuances that I'm not aware of that are unique to your particular business or industry. Think about it, put that language into the terms and conditions. That's the key takeaway here. So yeah, common mistakes. And it says right up at the top here, being vague or contradictory is not helpful. A lot of auctioneers actually seem to enjoy having some vagueness in their terms and conditions because they believe that it offers them greater flexibility. If you're a bully, you might be able to sort of enforce your way, but that's a lot like Calvin Ball. You guys know the cartoon Calvin and Hobbes, right? Where it's this little kid and his little stuffed tiger. They have a game called Calvin Ball where the rules are never the same and they make up new rules on the fly. If you are vague or you have hidden fees or it's contradictory, you're like Calvin in that game. And it's not going to end well. It might be funny, but I don't think that you want your auctions to be run like Calvin Ball. Make your auctions run a little bit more like baseball, right? Like where the rules are really well known and they're universal and enforced as well. To make it real fair, make it very clear so everyone's on the same page. A much better way of handling that. All right, so I don't think I'm going to go in between all of these different examples, but the general point, as you can see here, is to be much more clear, have good definitions, in terms of what you mean by the timing, have deadlines specified, in hours, dates, times, all of that. One of the only ones I think that I'd like to sort of point out here is that your terms and conditions might be kind of useless if they don't align with your marketing, your advertising, with the information in your catalog, and if they don't align with your user agreement. If your terms and conditions are contradictory with your user agreement, eventually somebody's going to find that pointed out and you will lose that argument. All right, I don't think it's even listed here, but here it is. Make key terms conspicuous and repeat them where bidders look. This one I will reiterate, okay? So the terms and conditions of the auction, that's one piece of text, if you will, that the users are going to agree to before they bid. But if there's something important in there, like really important to you, should be important to them, there are other places where you can put that language. So if you're using, for example, if you're using our software, consider putting it in the header text for the entire auction. If there's something very important that you want them to know, put it right up at the top so there's no way they can miss it. Yeah, they're going to agree to the terms and conditions, but also every single page says it. We actually have a feature that allows you to append a certain text to every single item in an auction. You can do that too. So it's inescapable. right? You want people to be very, very aware of the terms and conditions of the sale, not just at the time that they agree to them. A lot of people think about this in terms of court, like getting sued, and that's important, right? You want the terms to be conspicuous and repeated because that way you can prove to a judge, that you tried to let them know what the rules were and you were enforcing them. That's good. I hope you never get sued, and hopefully you're never in front of a judge. Where this stuff is going to come up is in chargeback disputes with the credit card companies. That's primarily where you're going to see these issues. And credit card companies, the dispute handlers there are not judges. They're just ordinary people trying to resolve disputes between cardholders and people like you. The more clear you are, the more normal language you use, and the more conspicuous the key terms are, the happier everyone will be. All right, now we have gotten to the questions and answers portion of the program. We only have about 12 minutes or so, and I'm going to see if there are any questions here. Give me just a minute. So, mhm. And I send out a copy of this presentation to the viewers. Yeah, sure, no problem. Of course I will. What else we got here? Can I prevent credit card chargebacks on auction purchases? I think I think I talked about this a decent amount already. Yes, yeah, you can't prevent. You can mitigate the potential damage from chargebacks. Definitely say that there are no chargebacks allowed, all sales are final, so on and so forth. Make sure that whatever auction platform you're using, that you're able to get a record of when they agreed to the terms and conditions. And whatever, like when you're touching credit cards, whatever your policy is on credit cards, whether you're talking about auto charging or relisting fees, or you're going to charge them the full amount due after a certain amount of time, whatever you're going to do with people's credit cards, be very, very, very clear about it. Put that language everywhere. If there are key terms to be considered, those key terms are credit card related terms. Again, if you're really good at writing terms and conditions, you're not going to have a lot of lawsuits with buyers. That's not really where the damage comes from. Sure, every now and then a buyer's going to sue you or something. That's maybe inevitable, but that's not where you're going to find regular pain. The regular pain is going to come from accepting credit cards and dealing with chargebacks. And so whatever you're going to do with a person's credit card, put that everywhere you can. Make that language abundantly clear. It belongs in your user agreement, your terms and conditions, maybe even drop it on every single item, or at least in the header of the auction. If you're going to be doing something a little bit weird with the credit cards, especially. Who is responsible for loading and damage during pickup? Hmm. Hmm. That sounds like that's something you've got to figure out. Generally speaking, so it depends on the location, but most of the time, auctioneers are going to suggest that the buyer's responsibility if they damage something. And so if I mentioned a few examples of the kinds of regular damage that can be inflicted. So again, if you're just selling retail goods or something like that, don't worry about it. It's not really gonna come up. But if you sell industrial assets or things, business through business liquidations, you're gonna have a lot of trouble with landlords if you break the property, or one of the common ones with business liquidations is buyers taking fixtures. I've seen that a lot, like a lot, and it can basically erase your profit from an auction. A landlord will get all of it if buyers steal fixtures and they let them. So having waivers in place is really important, especially, for example, if you're going to do any kind of assistance with loadout. If you have a forklift or you're going to have your people lifting up their assets, their purchases and loading them up, have waivers. Make sure they sign the waiver, that they understand, that they are responsible for damages. not you. And depends again on what it is that you're trying to achieve here. But you can do a good job with waivers, taking the responsibility for damage either to the property being purchased or the location of the event itself, by using waivers. Can you change the pickup dates after publishing the auction? Certainly, if you run your own online auction platform, like all of our customers do, you can do whatever you want. You're in full control. So does that mean you should? You can, actually. So if you're going to make a change, again, remember at the outset what I was saying is that announcements made later in the sale take precedence. Any announcement that you make that change the terms and conditions or change the sale process or change the description of an item, if you make a change, make it abundantly clear. Don't just go in there and make the change and assume that people are reading. No one is reading online. They didn't read it the first time. They're not going to read it the second time. So if you've made a change, put it in yellow, big, highlight, bold text that you've made a change. If you're using our software, send out a message to all of the bidders. Drop a message in saying, hey, a substantial change was made at this auction where we are changing the pickup dates. You need to know that. Let us know if you have a problem, right? Because you're trying to reduce the friction afterward. Do I need a separate website terms and auction terms? Yeah, I think that's what I mean. Website terms are what I was talking about when I said user agreement. So not everybody here has their own auction platform. If you're one of our customers, yes, you have terms that govern your website, and then you have terms and conditions of the sale itself. If you don't own your own platform, like you're using HiBid or ProxyBid or BidSpotter or whatever, they have a user agreement, and they have a website contract, if you will, and then you get to have auction terms. So kind of depends on where you're doing your auctions, but yes, generally speaking, what you will find is there's one contract for using the website, and there's another one, the one that we've been talking about today, terms and conditions that govern each particular auction event. All right, let me see if there's any others. I don't see any. Good. Chat still. No open questions. All right. Well, I hope this was helpful. I appreciate you being here today. Shoot me an email at daniel@auctionmethod. If you have any feedback or if you have any requests for future webinars, I'd be happy to hear from you. And sure, I will send out a copy of the presentation, the slides, to everyone who is here today. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a great weekend. Bye, everybody.